Hi, my name is Nicholas Beers. I'm a senior accounting major here at the Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. I'm very excited to have a conversation today with Jackie Cardello from GRF CPAs and Advisors about her accounting journey today. Thank you, Jackie, for taking the time to sit with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So first, would you mind telling me a little bit more about yourself and GRF?
Sure. I started with GRF it'll be almost 26 years ago to the day next month. As a senior accountant, a senior auditor, I had come over from another firm. And I've been there 26 years. I worked my way up through to partner. And in July of 2013, I took the title of managing partner and then president and managing partner. So I started as an auditor, also had a history in tax. Little secret, I actually preferred tax over audit.
Oh, man.
And I'll get to the story of how I landed in audit, but I ended up loving audit and made a career out of it, and now I manage the firm.
Wow, I think that's like an optimal career path that a lot of students like myself would love to have. I'm someone where I'm personally interested in audit, so I don't know about that whole tax part that you're talking about, but it seems very interesting. So to almost turn back the clock a little bit, I'm a student now, we want to talk towards all the other fellow students right now. So back when you were a student here at the University of Maryland, what led to you choosing accounting as your major? And were there any other options you were considering?
Well, there were other options, and actually it had nothing to do with accounting or business. I initially thought that I wanted to go to law school, and I really liked both psychology and English. So I was leaning more in that direction.
Okay.
And my advisor at the time, my college advisor, suggested that in case I didn't go to law school, maybe look at something that could translate into a better opportunity of getting a job, right? Because, this person said, well, if you do major in psychology or English, both great majors, what do you do beyond that? What would you want to do for a career if you don't go to law school? And that got me to thinking, and I really wasn't sure that I wanted to either teach or be a psychologist. And he said, well, would you consider general business? And I thought, okay, I'll consider general business. Why not? And my father is a retired CPA, never had accounting or CPA on my radar. I always thought of it as boring, stuffy. And then I took Principles of Accounting, Accounting 101, I'm not sure what they call it now.
Yep, same thing.
I had to take that as being a business major, and I loved it. I loved the class, and I thought, wow, this is actually pretty cool. And then I took the second class, Principles 2, I guess is what they call it, and decided that I thought I really wanted to major in accounting. And then by the time I finished the first intermediate accounting course, I knew that I wanted to major in accounting and get my CPA.
Gotcha. So you said when you started accounting, you kind of just fell in love with it right away.
I just fell in love with it.
What was it about accounting? Why did you choose it? What made you fall in love with it?
Well, I had a really, really good professor, which is a big help, someone who really draws you in and engages you, and they make it sort of fun and entertaining. But I think just the analytics, the numbers, I'm very detail oriented. So, that spoke to me. Everything had an order, had a rationale. I have an analytical brain as well, so that spoke to me. I'm a numbers person. As well as liking English, but I also liked math. So I just found it intriguing and thought, this would be a really interesting career, and started talking to people who were in accounting, and decided pretty early on that I wanted to specifically look at public accounting, because I also like the idea of working with various different clients.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like, we all find our own reasons to fall in love with accounting. I know for me, I was a big numbers guy too. Something really appealed to me about a balanced balance sheet, all these different things. So you touched on you thought it would be an interesting career. So I think a lot of students like myself, you find yourself taking these classes and you're wondering how can I go from being a student interested in accounting to actually being a professional? So what kind of resources or how did you go about it at the University of Maryland to, get those initial steps into your career in accounting?
Right. So a couple things, talking with the different professors and looking at the different options I had. We had interviews set up even way back then. We would have employers come and interview, and talking with the various employers about the options were really valuable to me. And just talking with people in the profession in general and kind of getting different perspectives. I remember talking with some of the professors, trying to figure out, because when you first start out in accounting, and when I ask some of the young students and I say, do you want public or private? They don't understand the difference initially, nor did I. So of course it's understanding, what does it mean to be in the private side where you're working for a company internally, versus in public accounting where you're working for an accounting firm that works on many different companies. So it was really a combination of things. It was, advice and mentoring from professors. It was the opportunity to meet different employers and practice interview skills with them. Being involved with, there was a club or an organization back then. Honestly, I don't remember the name of it because it was so long ago, that was helpful, but it was other like-minded students that we would get together and, talk about the different aspects of accounting, the different possibilities. And also, at the time it was really centered around three kind of core disciplines. It was audit, tax, and then outsourced accounting, which is what we call it now. Now you have a lot more broad range of different services you can offer through accounting. But at the time, it was, kind of looking at the tax interested me, as I mentioned earlier. I did like audit too, but tax interested me. And then, of course, the outsourced accounting or bookkeeping or, isn't necessarily something you would do a deep dive on in college. But it was having exposure to the different courses, and as you progress in your education, the classes get a little smaller. And I also took advantage of some of the summer courses to kind of get ahead, so I could jumpstart and take a class so that I could get all of the classes I needed for the CPA exam. This is before the 150-hour requirement.
Okay,
but there were optional classes like advanced accounting that weren't part of the accounting major, but you had to take to sit for the exam. So it was having the ability to take care of all of that and have all of those options at my fingertips while I was here, and really be able to get exposure to some great education, some great professors, and learning the finer points of what does it mean to be an auditor, what does it mean to be in tax, cost accounting, which I quickly decided I was probably my least favorite of all the accounting courses. But there was such a variety of courses and really good instruction that I took advantage of here, and I feel like I got just a fantastic education.
Well, thank you for that. I think you touched on a plethora of resources for students to access while they're here at the university. So, to just fast forward that clock a little bit, it seems like you're a go-getter from an early age, but what did the beginning of GRF look like for you? And what do you feel like you really learned in those first couple of years?
Well, the beginning was, again, just kind of trying to, learn as much as I could. I pretty much figured out early on that I really aspired to be a partner. I wanted to be an owner. I wanted to really make a career of it and work my way up the ranks to partner. And it was learning as much as I could. And I realized that I really enjoyed working with clients and people. And I liked that. A lot of people think of accountants as introverts, and I sort of consider myself a little introverted, but I like working with people, and I like the idea of helping clients and helping them solve a problem, if you will, or problems. I like helping them with their mission. I work with a lot of nonprofits. I've worked with both for-profit and nonprofit companies, but I do work with a lot of nonprofits. And so that goes even beyond the debits and the credits and the bottom line, and it's helping them figure out, how to pursue their mission and how to meet their goals, and how to get funding for that, how to measure the metrics to make sure that they can afford certain programs that they want to do. And so I just really found that to be really interesting pretty early on in my career.
Gotcha. Well, it seems like you have that sponge-like quality of just absorbing a little bit of everything around you, and you can see a general fascination with a lot of different parts of accounting. So I got to ask you, because, especially these days and age, someone sticking with the same company for their whole career is getting less and less common. So what did the decision process look like for you to decide to grow, internally with GRF and stick with that kind of path? What was it about GRF for you?
I think it's the culture, really. To be perfectly candid, there were times that I thought about leaving and exploring other options. It's hard work, but very rewarding work. It's not unlike any other career, and when you're young and you're working your way, you're up the path and, trying to work your way further up the ladder. And there were times I thought, well, is public accounting really what I want to do? Is accounting in general what I want to do? But the culture of the firm, it was a small firm at the time. Now we're more like a regional size firm. But we still maintain a very close-knit family culture. And the challenge kept me going, because when I started talking to other people who were doing other things, specifically outside of public accounting, or accounting in general, I started realizing that it was challenging to me and I was never bored. I was never bored. So for example, if I thought about, well, what if I go into, something to do with retail? And I had worked in retail, when I was coming up through high school and college. And there were many times where I was very bored. And I kind of thought back to that and I thought, well, what would it look like if I work in this career for this company? So really for me, it was the culture of the firm, and it was also the constant challenge. I just loved learning new things and never feeling like I was working on the same thing over and over and over again and just getting bored. It was always something new clients to work with, and I really like that.
Gotcha. I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people, growing up, like when you don't really know too much about it, accounting does get stereotyped as that, more boring, monotonous, desk type job. And, thinking accountants are just boring. So based on your experience, how would you describe, your fellow accountants that you worked with? What kinds of people have you worked with?
They are anything but boring. It's a stereotype, and it's very inaccurate. They're some of the most outgoing, intelligent and intellectual and fun people that I know. I have many good friends that I've developed over the years. We have lots of fun outside of work. And the idea of it being stuffy and boring and just sitting at a desk all day and, just being all work and no play is not true. And if you want to see what I mean, go to a conference, for one of the big associations or one of the big CPE conferences where you learn your continuing education credits, and you'll see what I mean. They know how to have a good time. We know how to have a good time.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's very interesting because, especially with my generation today, it seems like it's just growing importance, this idea of work-life balance. And you talked about having fun outside of work. And I think a lot of people, when they're just looking into accounting, they look into getting their CPA, they're terrified of busy season and whatnot. So, what does it look like for you? Like, what does the work-life balance look like? And do you think it is, normal for an accountant to have a good work-life balance?
I think it is normal now. Hasn't always been that way. But again, a lot of careers are very similar. I had friends who went to law school and were attorneys, and they'll tell you the same thing, that they work crazy hours. Now I think that it is an incredibly flexible career. It lends itself to working remotely very well and scheduling, client visits and, other work-related events. Flexible scheduling, scheduling when it, can suit your lifestyle. We have many folks who have young children or caregivers, for other family members who work very flexible schedules. And the profession has allowed me to raise 2 children of my own who I started the profession before I had kids. Had my kids. They're now 17 and 20, And I never missed anything with them. I was there for every Halloween and Valentine's Day party, every school play, every field trip, every hockey, baseball game, gymnastics meet, you name it. I was there because I was able to schedule my work around that.
Well, I think that's what everybody wants to hear. Like at the end of the day, no matter what career you choose, everybody wants to be able to never miss those moments. And so, to kind of think about all this, to have this career, you needed to get your CPA certification.
I did.
So what was it like, what would you say to everybody that's looking into getting a CPA? What does that certification look like, and what does it do for you? What doors does it open?
Well, I would say do it as soon as you can. I tackled that right after I graduated from college, got it out of the way. It's incredibly invaluable. Don't give up. It took me 2 tries, actually. And I know I've had friends that it's taken many more, and they get very discouraged, but they keep at it and they pass it, and don't give up. It will happen, as long as you stick to it and you study. And for me, it's been invaluable. It gives you is still in the profession. The CPA is a very respected designation. We are truly viewed as trusted advisors, and it adds another element of trust along with the rigorous education that we have. And it's opened a lot of doors for me. And I know, again, I have friends and peers and colleagues who got their CPA and didn't stay in public accounting or didn't stay in accounting at all, but it was really a great foundation for them. It's the discipline, it's education, it's, the designation itself is, again, it's a hard thing to get, but once you get it, it gives you a sense of confidence. And it's afforded me the opportunity to become an owner in a public accounting firm in the state of Maryland. State laws stipulate that you have to be a CPA to be a shareholder. And I've also used my other skills that I learned growing up and through college. So it's not just all accounting either. So for example, now, I started as an auditor, and I was boots on the ground in the field doing the audit work. And again, worked my way up now as a managing partner of the firm. I have very few clients that I handle. I really refer the business to other folks because the firm is my client. So managing the firm, that's my number one job. And I have found that I have been utilizing my people skills and my analytical skills. And it's very interesting, and it's a lot more, again, I've gotten away from the debits and credits, and I'm very involved with, furthering the firm visibility, the profession. I'm involved in things like this. I'm able to go out and be involved in association activities and do things to help mentor young people who are interested in the profession, and also to create more interest in the profession. And so it's not like I'm sitting at a desk all day. I get to spend my day here on the University of Maryland campus and get paid for it.
No, I mean, that's great. And I think it's really interesting what you touch on here. All these different sorts of skills kind of touches on like how not just like, the CPA, but accountants in general are continually, forced to evolve and add new skills to their skill set. So, I think a lot of students know like there is that debits and credits, and I know you've touched on it a little bit, but what would you say are all the skills that our modern day accountant really needs to have to be successful today?
Well, communication skills are key, and that's going to be in any career that you go into. It's really important to be able to communicate both verbally and in written form in an effective manner. And, being able to just kind of think outside the box, look at the big picture, and also be a good listener. You have to be able to listen. You have to be analytical. That comes in very handy, being able to look at a situation kind of like a puzzle. I think of it as a puzzle, and here are the pieces of the puzzle. How do I solve this puzzle? That's pretty much what I do on a day-to-day basis, is basically problem solving and then planning, being able to look towards the future and plan to see where is the profession going, where are we going as a firm, Technology is very helpful as well. That's really important. They're really teaching a lot more of that than I had when I was in college, because it's necessary. And again, and that's going to be in any career, but in accounting, especially with artificial intelligence and, just all the different technologies that we have available to us. But I think being able to communicate and being a good people person is very helpful because, again, and you've heard this said, and it's true, accounting is a language of business. You have to be able to understand it. You have to be able to speak it. And that involves, being able to take a set of financial statements and, talk about what is the story these financial statements are telling, and to help your clients, or if you're working in a company in their internal department, to help the stakeholders be able to understand, here's what the numbers mean, here's the story the financials are telling. So there has to be that ability to, look at the big picture, analyze it, put it into a story that other people who don't have an accounting background can understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. And it's like very inspiring to hear as someone that wants to go into accounting that, that it's like, it's more than just working with numbers, and that you really develop this well-rounded skill set. And amongst a lot of things you're talking about, you pointed out the technology aspect. And I think a lot of people today are really scared of this artificial intelligence and like, oh man, are computers going to take over? Am I going to lose my job? Some people are worried that accounting's one of those jobs. So what would you say to that? Do you think accountants are going to get replaced by computers, or how do you think they're going to stay around?
I don't think they're going to get replaced by computers or artificial intelligence. People have been saying for years that, audits are going to go away, artificial intelligence and robots will replace our jobs. And that really goes for just about every profession. Mm-hmm. You could say that about any discipline. People have talked about that in medicine with robotics. And there will always be a need for a human element. Machines are only as good as what you feed them. Mm. You have to understand what the components are that go into the machine, the computer, if you will, and then be able to understand the output and have that human approach to it to help other people understand what it means for them, on a personal level.
Gotcha. Yeah. And so like you said, you help other people understand the information. So through the years as an accountant, what are some other, stakeholders or groups of people that you've gotten to help, or who do you really interact with as an accountant?
Well, other than my employees who are my stakeholders, again, as managing the firm, it's also clients, and it's the board members of those clients. If it's a for-profit or public company, it's your investors and your owners, and the you're dealing with banks, you're dealing with attorneys, from the different business aspects that go into running a company. But essentially, for me, it's been, my favorite thing has been dealing with clients, helping the clients, sitting with them, talking through what keeps you up at night. Mm-hmm. What are your goals for the future? Where do you see yourself a year from now? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? What is your ideal definition of success, and helping them get there and talking through ways to get to that success.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. When you phrase it that way, it seems like pretty much everyone needs accountants to be successful. And you talked about this idea of success. So I'm curious, for you as someone that is objectively very successful, for you, what did success look like? How did you define it? And, you spoke to this idea of waking up to a challenge every day. But what, in a greater sense, what's really been your motivating factor, and what has led you to achieving such success?
Well, for me, it's having the honor of being the managing partner of a firm that is very successful and growing, and seeing young folks coming out of college into the profession, growing up through the profession, and thriving. And for me, that's success. It's being able to pass that along and pay forward what I have learned and experienced, and share my stories with the next generation, and then the next generation beyond that, and so on and so forth, to be able to see people thrive and have an accounting career and really enjoy it.
I mean, I think that's great to hear. And I think it's like truly inspiring, because you have done a lot, and it's just awesome to hear as someone that, I'm going to start out in auditing, and I would love to be in a position where you are today. So that kind of motivation that you have, I think is just really rare. And so I definitely admire that quality.
Great.
Okay, so diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
That's everything today. You see it popping up everywhere in a lot of different forms. So now you received from the Greater Washington Societies of CPAs the Champion of Women Award, along with, I saw that you had received some other awards as well. So going off of that, so would you say that accounting is a career field anyone can be successful in regardless of their gender?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. It's and that's something that I help, speak to when I'm mentoring younger women and individuals who want to have families. That the flexibility again is really, the profession is just a really flexible profession, and it's really, really great for someone who wants an interest outside of work, which I think most people today do. At least the generations coming in, they want that, as you said, work-life balance. But as a woman coming up through the profession, it has allowed me, again, to be able to have a family, be a mom, go to their activities, and, have a balance outside of work. Diversity, equity, inclusion, it's also, it's mentoring more women into leadership in the profession and other populations that are at a disadvantage. And when you talk about stakeholders, they too are stakeholders. So we look at, we're very big on ESG, and we have a department that is focusing internally and externally on ESG. And so you look at stakeholders outside of your clients and your employees. You have, the general public, you have your communities, and they're also stakeholders. And it's also, again, individuals who we want to encourage to join the profession who otherwise feel like, maybe there's a barrier to getting into the profession. And to me, those are stakeholders as well. And that's why I'm doing things like being involved in the University of Maryland and various DEI activities and mentoring of students, because it's really important for people to know that it may be a perceived barrier, but there's a way around it. There are people there to help you. You need to ask for help, and we're happy to help. And it is really important to understand that regardless of what your background is or what your situation is, it's a great profession for anyone who really, really wants to be in it.
I think that's great. And once again, it's really showing, to me at least, that accounting really is this flexible career opportunity for a wide base of people. But to just out of curiosity, right, the landscape has changed a lot in the last, 25 years. So, what have you seen on a DEI front, for the accounting landscape over the years?
Oh boy. Well, I have seen more women and more people of color in the profession, which I think is fantastic. I am still one of few managing partners of accounting firms that is a woman, but those numbers are improving. There are more and more women in leadership, which is more and more women at the board level who are becoming partners, owners, more people of color as well, and that is changing. And I think it's wonderful. I think we're reaching a more diverse population, and again, breaking down the barriers so that more people can come into the profession. I still think we have some work to do, but I think that we are light years ahead of where I was when I came into the profession. And there weren't very many women who made it beyond, the manager level.
Right. And I think that's great to say, there's continuous growth. And I think, there's always going to be room for improvement one way or another. But, I think we all have hope. I think my generation's full of, people aspiring to make all these dreams become a reality. And now to touch back on what you mentioned with ESG, I think it would be great, if you could just elaborate a little bit on the importance of ESG and what do you think how it will impact companies in the future?
Sure. So ESG, I believe, is here to stay. There are people that when you talk to them, they feel like it's a trend and it's not going to be part of the long term of any company. And I disagree with that. I think it is definitely here to stay. And we see the importance of it with the young folks coming out of college and those interested in coming into not only our profession, but really any company that they're going to work for. They're very concerned about everything ESG. They're concerned about the environment. They're concerned about social impact and governance. And they're concerned about the footprint that we're leaving. And when you look around, we really don't have a choice but to be concerned about those things. You look at everything going on in the environment, everything going on geopolitically, all the social, things going on, the social impact that companies can have. So it really is important, and it is here to stay, and we are making an investment in that. And it's one of those things that people don't think of it as part of the accounting profession, because it's not something that I grew up. It wasn't a term when I was growing up through college and when I graduated. So some people are a little intimidated by it, but I think when they start to understand that it is a real concept, it is here to stay. People coming into the profession now are very concerned about more than a job and a paycheck. They want to know, what good they're doing in the world, making sure that they're, the footprint that they're leaving behind, that they're protecting the environment, that they're making a positive social impact. All of that is very important to them. We are currently looking into becoming a certified B Corp, which covers everything ESG, even down to, which vendors are you using, making sure that you're not using, like child labor, things like that. So it's really, really all encompassing. You even have to it goes to the type of light bulbs you're using. Are they energy efficient? Again, it's preserving our world for future generations. So it's all of that is really important to the new generations growing up. And for me, that is super important, and it's just as important as, the other services that we provide to clients, the financial services.
Yeah, and I think, that's it's really inspiring, and it brings a lot of hope towards the future. And now you said you believe ESG is here to stay. Mm-hmm. So now if it does stay and this initiative does roll forward, what do you think the future looks like with ESG at the forefront?
Well, I think it opens up the opportunity for a lot of other services for clients. For example, that's one of the things that we are starting to look at is the external part of ESG. What does that mean to our clients, and how can we help them navigate ESG and to become, more energy efficient, more environmentally friendly, to make, a more positive social impact. I think it opens up, definitely some possibilities for new service lines, and, certainly an interesting aspect of an accounting career or any career. But I think that it's going to really have a positive impact on any company, and in my case, an accounting firm, in that we're going to be more mindful about everything that we do and, again, the impact on the environment and society. Even printing things, for example. We long ago established a policy whereby we no longer print hard copies for clients, and we would let them know that, we're environmentally friendly, we're digital, we're going to send you a PDF copy of your financials. If you would like to request a printed copy, it's going to cost you X dollars, but, please consider the environment type of thing. So we're kind of applying it across the board, and, I think it's exciting. I think it's a good thing.
I see. Well, with that last comment, I'll put this paper copy. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right? Hey, I still have some paper too.
Well, that's really interesting. It seems like it's just one of the many things you have to consider in your role as managing partner and president. So just out of curiosity, with that big of a role, what would you say are the most interesting parts of your job? And, what really does the day-to-day look like for you in your current role?
Ooh, wow. Again, I think it's a little bit of problem solving on a day-to-day, and it could be small problems or it could be larger problems, but no problem is without a solution. And a lot of it is strategic planning. That's what really energizes me and excites me as the future of the profession, and knowing that it's changing very rapidly, much more rapidly than when I was growing up in accounting. And, I think there's endless possibilities, and I think that most people wanting to come into the profession now are really thinking outside of the box, and, coming in with a mindset they're more nimble, they're more flexible and adaptable to change. The technology part is both intimidating to me and exciting, as being one of the older generations who's probably closer to retirement than graduated, than starting their career. Technology sometimes intimidates me, I'll admit. But it's exciting. I've seen what it can do. The tools that we have now they're mind-blowing. But for me, it's really, I look at it like I'm the captain of a ship. I'm steering the ship. And it's exciting for me to plan the strategy of the future of the firm, put together, the team that's going to assist with pursuing that strategy and executing it. And it starts at the top, and it starts with leadership, and it goes all the way down to the very newest staff level person. Everybody has a role in it. We have a lot of tasks and committees, and we give everyone a voice. And to me, that's really exciting. And it's the collaborative teamwork part of it, and the teamwork aspect of working with an incredible team of people to, keep our firm going into the future and continue serving clients and doing it in an efficient way that's mindful again of everything ESG and the outside of the debits and credits. Again, some of it, at first is a little daunting. Like I said, ESG, we didn't have that when I was coming up in the profession. But to me, that's what makes it exciting for me, are all these new things that are evolving. Now we look at risk assessment is a big thing. And it used to be you look at financial statements in a company, you look at financial risk, but there's risks other than that. Who would have ever thought we would have had a pandemic, right? Right. Now that's a big risk factor. That changed the way we look at a lot of things. So for me, it's getting, getting to look at the more global aspect of, what the accounting profession needs, where we're going in the future, what the clients need, trying to help determine, the next step. What do we think our clients are going to need before they even, realize that they need it? A lot of it is having to do with things like ESG and risk and cybersecurity and things like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. It seems like a very interesting forefront, constantly adapting, evolving with a lot of the other things we had talked about. And you spoke about this excitement that you have. And I think, especially for the younger generations, one of the main sources of excitement and people look for in a career is the idea of getting to travel for your job. So for you in your career, how much opportunity have you been given to travel? And, where are some of the places that you've gotten to go for your work?
Wow. That's one of the really cool things about my career. I've gotten to travel a lot. And that's one of our other recruiting points that we use to recruit young people to our firm. We work with a lot of NGOs, nonprofits that have, global missions, and they receive federal funding from not only the U.S., but various other countries. And I've gotten to travel for those particular clients that are doing work, for example, in Africa, Ukraine, Russia, Italy, France. We've traveled to more countries than I could possibly name as a team. Auditing. See, audit.
Yeah.
Yeah, as we are boots on the ground. That's one of our specialties that we've carved a niche, and it's very attractive to international clients, that we will actually go to the field, to the villages where you are doing the work. We will, observe and audit at the actual field office, which is really interesting because you get to see the mission in action. It's not just seeing it on a piece of paper and looking at the financials and saying, yeah, okay, I see that, they provide water to, this part of Africa where they don't have water and they're building wells. You actually get to go see the wells and see what they're doing. And you see it in action, which is really just super cool. It's the best way I can describe it.
Once again, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you've pretty much well utilized your passport. So I think that's something, another thing that people could get behind. And one of the things you touched on during that was saying for your role as an auditor and for auditing that you got to do these things. So, I think a lot of people that are considering accounting, they think about auditing and they think about tax. And, you've mentioned earlier that you did a little bit of both. So if you could speak to just briefly, what intrigued you about auditing and what intrigued you about tax and kind of comparing the two a little bit.
Ooh, that's tough. I'm going to geek out here for a second. The tax code, all the tax laws just intrigued me, and all the very complex corporate and partnership tax transactions, when I took advanced tax here on this campus, were super just intriguing to me. Again, it's about the numbers, and it's about having a piece of paper that tells a story and having the numbers back it up. Auditing, again, that's more solving, it's a puzzle, it's kind of, solving a puzzle. And this is a funny story. I came to GRF with the understanding that I was going to be primarily tax. Oh, okay. And I would do a little bit in audit. And I would kind of flip-flop between busy seasons. And I had come from a firm where I had done a lot of outsourced accounting and bookkeeping and audit. And I really wanted to get my feet wet in tax. And I was I was offered to be one of the team members who went to the job in Paris for an audit.
Oh, okay.
With the understanding that if I got to go on this Paris job, which was 2 weeks, by the way, which for, a young 20-something-year-old was like very cool, getting paid to go to Paris, right? Mm-hmm. That I would stay in audit. So that was that. The rest was history. And I enjoyed it. I did enjoy audit. It was just more, I kind of wanted to see what tax was all about. But, I never looked back. I love audit. I love the clients. I was getting to travel a lot, which was really, really interesting to me. And again, I was specializing in nonprofits, had a handful of for-profits, but I kind of went in the direction of nonprofits because I just found it, really rewarding to work with the clients on their mission, on something other than, their bottom line.
Gotcha. Well, that Paris story is really intriguing, but I'm curious if you have, any other interesting stories from your career that you'd want to share, or maybe something, funny or intriguing about a client that you've had before.
Really, nothing I can think of. I mean, the traveling was just one of the, and that was one of the other things that kept me there too, was the opportunity to travel. I really enjoyed that. Not for everybody, but we found that it is a big draw for young folks coming out of college, having the opportunity to travel. I can't really think of any other stories other than, like I said, if you want to dispel the stereotype about an accountant, go to an event where there's a bunch of accountants, and you will quickly learn that we are not boring. We know how to have a good time just as well as anyone else. And we've had some really great, events for our firm where we get everybody together, and it's a lot of fun to get the team together and, dance and have good food and have fun.
Gotcha. Well, I like to think that I'm not boring either, and I chose accounting, so I'd like to say that rings true. But you talked about how, that's one of the many things that you use to draw in, students today into accounting. So if you could summarize it all, what would you say, like, why should students choose accounting? What is it about the career path that makes it so valuable? Well,
again, I think it's a foundation for any, first of all, a business career that you might choose. Even if you choose to go into something else later, having accounting as your foundation, understanding financials and how the numbers relate to one another is important. And, again, if you get a degree in accounting, there are other things you can do with that as well. I know it used to be that the FBI liked to hire accountants because they're very trained to be detail-oriented. But there's a lot of, I have friends and peers who have left accounting with an accounting degree and even a CPA to go into other fields because, again, it gives you a really good understanding of business and how the business works and why numbers are important and, the story that they tell and, how to measure. How do you measure, the operations of a company? And let's say you want to go start your own business. It's very helpful to, again, have an understanding of how the business works. I've had friends who've gone off to start businesses in completely unrelated to accounting, like in a retail capacity. And it was key for them because they had comfort with numbers and how numbers worked, and they could understand the concepts of accounting and financial statements. What does a financial statement mean? What are the different ratio and key metrics that we look at? And that was really helpful for them to, understand how their business was operating, what was going wrong, what was going right, how to improve it. And again, it's a flexible career. You don't just, it's not, it's no longer audit and tax. There's advisory, there's accounting and advisory. We have an accounting technology services group now, and that's specifically what they deal with, is everything accounting technology related, is implementing the software programs and servicing them. And again, risk management is another thing we do. So it really kind of lends itself to a lot of other things that impact companies, and it's just a very good foundation.
No, I mean, I think that's a great explanation of why accounting. And I think something that a lot of people would be intrigued to is, like you spoke about, friends and colleagues pivoting out and using their CPA for other things. So, if you could be a little more specific, what have you seen people use their CPA for? What else can you do with it?
I've seen people go to law school and become attorneys, and having an understanding of companies and businesses and how they work can serve very well in some aspects of law, going into law. And again, friends who went into retail businesses and opened up a business, either, making something or, selling, clothing or different products, where they were able to do that successfully with an understanding of, I know how a company operates, I know what the numbers mean, I know what a trial balance is, what a financial statement is, and I know how the numbers relate. And, if you need to go to a bank for a loan, you have to understand what the bank's looking at. And that is very helpful to understand all of that when you're, opening any kind of company.
Yeah, once again, it seems like a general theme has been how versatile and how, really diverse the careers in accounting are. So I'd like to overall just ask you, is there any piece of advice you would give to students that are considering a career in accounting?
I think it's a great career. It's served me incredibly well. Getting the CPA was the best thing that I ever did. I think that some people may worry about the extra hours that you need to get for the CPA, but I took extra hours as it was, even before it was a requirement, because I found that taking a variety of courses and giving myself the best exposure to all different types of courses, be it, sciences, English, math, and then again, accounting, communication. I was a big fan of English, so I actually minored in English.
Okay.
So to me, that shouldn't scare anyone away, because there are so many interesting courses out there that you can take that will serve you well, again, in any career that you go into. Psychology came in very handy for me. I took many psychology courses, and I found that very useful. So I think that, just if you have any thought about going into accounting, talk to some people who are in accounting in the profession, talk to people who have been in it for a long time, get their perspective, what their journey was. I'm willing to bet they'll talk to, a few people who didn't decide, right out of, from the time they were a little kid that they were going to be an accountant. I think there's a lot of people that got into it indirectly, and that it's been a very, very rewarding career to them. There's a lot of possibilities. Again, if you go into accounting for a company or a public accounting firm and you decide that's not for you, it's very versatile, as you said, and you can parlay that into any career. It just gives you such a good foundation, and the discipline that you learn is, you're exposed to a lot of different things. Again, it teaches you to be analytical, detail-oriented, and that can only help you in any profession. But I love accounting. I love helping clients. It's really, helping people understand their companies, helping them understand, how to further their mission, further their goals. And, I like working with people. There's an opportunity to work with people. So it's, to me, it's a rewarding career. And again, it's very flexible. So for someone, not wanting to work crazy hours and wanting to have a flexible career, it lends itself very, very well to that, while at the same time still being very challenging and very financially rewarding. There's that.
Yeah.
There is that piece of it. Let's not forget to mention that. So while people say, oh, I don't want to get the CPA or the 150 hours or accounting is hard, I have friends who are engineers, doctors, lawyers. That's hard too. All of it's hard. But, for me, I found that it clicked. And while it was hard, I think the amount of effort I put in, the reward that I've received in return has far exceeded the the effort, and the cost benefit to me was a no-brainer. The benefits far outweigh the cost because the sky's the limit. You can do anything you want with it.
Well, I'm motivated and excited to do accounting just sitting here listening to you.
Good.
So I'm sure a lot of
Good.
people listening will feel the same. Overall, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to sit with me today. It was great to
Thank
hear
you.
your story and listen to the many insights you've learned over the years in your career.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and this has been a lot of fun.